Good morning, members of the press, citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, in Trinidad and Tobago and those in the region and outside of the region, joining us for our regular Sunday morning press conference at the Office of the Leader of the Opposition in Port of Spain, Trinidad. This Sunday morning, as previously, we join you to bring some information and perspective on several critical matters of current affairs, several political developments taking place at this time in our very troubled republic. There can be no doubt that this country endures at this time enormous distress on the social front, in terms of the economy, in terms of the education system, health system, and so on. So this morning, we will update the members of the press on some matters for the next couple hours or so. And it is my pleasure this morning to be joined by our Shadow Minister of Education and the Member of Parliament for Tabaquite, the very distinguished Anita Haynes, who joins us this morning to speak on education and related matters in the national domain. So without any further ado, could I ask Anita to take the floor?
Thank you very much, Dr. Moonilal, and I join you saying good morning to those who regularly tune in to our Sunday morning press briefing. Today, like other Sundays, as you said, we are going to bring to light some issues, but it is my unfortunate circumstance this morning to raise an issue that has horrified and shocked the nation, and that brings me to the Roodal RC school and the incident that took place. There are a couple of things surrounding the video that the entire nation saw. There have been some developments since, and there have been no developments from the Ministry of Education since as well. And so those are some of the things that I'll seek to address this morning. As I said before, it brings us in the opposition no pleasure to have to discuss issues like this. We have been raising the issue of escalating crime, what it means for us as a society, what it means for us going forward, the day-to-day lives citizens have been saying, we have been feeling it, living in a state of insecurity, of fear, afraid to leave your homes. And now we've gotten to the point where we're seeing it, that you have to be afraid to send your children to physical school. Coming off of 2 years of online virtual learning, dealing with the fallout of learning loss, we have to now face the very real circumstance that the crime situation in Trinidad and Tobago is impacting our education sector in a major way. We have seen the government's main spokesperson on this issue thus far being the Minister of National Security, and that makes the situation that much more worse. The crime that is affecting our school system and the response that we've been faced with from the government thus far brings me to my first question. Is there really an all-of-government approach to issues? Can they keep saying that? Are we even to believe this idea of an all-of-government approach? Because the silence we've gotten from the Minister of Education, save and except a response in Parliament to one of our colleagues, the member for Naparima, other than that, we've had utter silence from the Minister of Education. The excuse, presumably, is that this is a national security issue. So, make up your mind. Where is the all-of-government approach? Where are we looking to the intersections of social development, of community development, of education, and of national security to bring a sense of peace, of real peace into our society? Our nation is at war. You cannot tell me in the middle of the day, in a school day, you have students ducking for cover. Let us bring the reality of the situation. That was not nighttime, because remember they used to tell us, be careful what time you go out, secure yourself, etc. Do all you can to keep yourself safe. It's school time, you know. If we were in the middle of the day, children would have been, they could have been in recess, they could have been outside playing. And then what do we get from the government? Callousness, utter disregard, passing of the buck, their usual way of saying, listen, it could have been worse. That is essentially what the Minister of National Security said in his Facebook post, which was meant to serve to an entire nation. That is the scant regard they treat our country with. That they would use a Facebook post, his personal Facebook, to create a response to a national issue. And why the nation is taking this issue so much to heart, it's because that could have been swept under the rug so easily. We could not have known had it not been for a teacher taking it upon herself not only to secure the students, but to publish the information. What the minister is telling us in his Facebook post is an everyday occurrence, and the rest of the public would not have known. An everyday occurrence, midday gun violence near schools. That is where we're at right now. And it cannot be dismissed. It cannot be easily dismissed to say that the shooting was not inside the school. I think perhaps only the Minister of National Security was under the impression that the shooting was inside school, and that's why we were upset. People were well aware of what was happening. It did not reduce the level of horror that this nation was facing looking on at that video. Simply because you are aware, except for the Minister of National Security, that bullets travel. We have had not one, but two in the last month instances where bullets meant for others got to children. This is in October 2022. You had bullets meant for others getting to children, and then you are telling us, take it easy, don't worry, they were shooting near the school, not inside the school. And that is what passes for governance in this country. That is what passes, and this is a Minister of National Security that has been escaping the wrath of the cabinet because his incompetence has been on full display from the very beginning. From the very beginning. And then we're being told about a static patrol perhaps being looked at near the school and increased patrols near this particular school. However, you may recall when we were discussing school violence, an issue that plagued the nation when we reopened physical schools, and an issue that is ongoing, they made a decision to place police officers inside the school. So the question isn't now whether or not there are sufficient enough police in or around the school. The question is your inability to curb gang violence nationwide. And so to say now, right, that, and again, to say now that the police told you that the violence was near the school and the students were not in danger. We know no police officer told you that. Again, and that you would then look to blame police officers by saying we'll put them close to the school, and if that doesn't stop the gun violence, we don't know what will. The problem is the governance of Trinidad and Tobago. This is a PNM problem. It is a competence problem at the highest level. They have been unable to secure our state. They have been unable to keep this nation safe. They are now unable to curb this spiraling murder rate. And now they are incompetent at keeping our nation's children safe. Never have we seen in this country, we have never seen an instance where students have to include active shooter training for our students. That you have to be prepared for what happens if there is shooting near the school. Where do you go? The cover. What is our policy position? I've had principals calling me to say we are at a point now when we must discuss what happens in our school when there's active gang violence near to the school. That is what we're discussing in 2022 in Trinidad and Tobago. And if that does not cause the society to wake up and to stand up for ourselves and say we cannot skate by with excuses, with absentee ministers, with ministers who, when they do have something to say is better, they said nothing at all because they brought nothing to the nation. We're not even asking for things like comfort. We're asking for targeted interventions and for people to be held responsible because it is insufficient to set a target. Earlier this year, in discussing the education sector and in discussing school violence, we raised a number of issues. And we were told about programs in areas like Laventille, in schools nearby, and that they were meant to reduce violence overall in these areas and to improve over time what is happening in terms of school dropout rates and what it means for our overall crime situation. And you know what? They come time and time. In the budget, I was very careful to ask for what were the metrics you're using to measure success. Because if we are introducing measures or we are talking about measures and we are not measuring their success, then we are simply spinning top in mud. So here we are, a society spiraling out of control. Our students dodging bullets in our school system. A Minister of National Security telling us that, well, insinuating that we are overreacting because our reaction should only be warranted if there were a fatality. But in the absence of that, we should all be cool. Don't worry about it. They'll sort it out. And a Minister of Education who, when responding to the HDC, can respond very quickly, can respond to a letter very quickly, has been unable to say anything of substance on this matter. For a government that can pull themselves together to file an injunction against teachers seeking their just dues for working hard, for keeping an education sector alive and thriving in spite of failures at the top, in spite of failures in government policy, that the government can act when they are acting in their interest, in the interest of the PNM, in the interest of their political institution, that they can get up. You could see all sorts of action, you could see all sorts of campaigning, they know what kind of leaders they'll be now, talking within themselves, among themselves, but to talk to the nation and to say to the nation that there will never be another instance of students ducking from bullets, that there will not be an instance that it is unacceptable to have gang violence at any point in time, any day, any time in this country, but certainly not next to schools, not nearby to schools. You know, the Minister of National Security insinuated that gangs were just doing their thing. Gangs were acting as gangs do, and therefore we as a society must just be prepared to stay out of their way. You know? If you don't get caught up in it, and all will be well. Do you recall that a former Attorney General told us that they knew where every gang member was, and once they got the anti-gang legislation, that this would all be a thing of the past? How many years ago that was? We are now counting the years, and we are not counting the gang members held to account. We are now looking at moving schools out of areas, we are now looking at our education sector, knowing that access to education and education is a passport out of poverty, a solution, a long-term solution to our crime situation. We are saying, you know what? We will move the school out of the community because we are unable to move the gangs out of the community. Move the schools, move the children. However they find their way, whatever the expenses may be, if their parents are able to take them out, whatever. That is saying to that community, to the community surrounding Rose Hill RC, that they have failed you, that they have completely given up on the community, that they would rather move the school than take the necessary steps to get the gangs out. And this is a space where the sitting member of parliament for the area sits as part of their legislative arm. The member of parliament for the area, who I would hope should be able to lobby for stronger interventions to keep the community safe, that he represents, in the manner that we would represent, in the manner that Dr. Moonilal represents for Ramhaitrace Hindu School at every chance that he gets, to say, let's get those children in a safe home, in a place that belongs to them for their school to be constructed forthwith. This member of parliament in Keith, Scotland is saying, you know what? We might have to look at moving the school. We may have to look at giving up on the community, ceding the community to the gangs. That is what we're facing right now. And as we move forward and we as a nation sit with what happened at Rose Hill RC School and what happened nearby to Bishop's Anstey, in this week as well. There's also gun violence happening near to the school, to a teacher. As we sit with our society and we realize that this is not happening just because, we can trace a very clear line to this violence. It is the failure of P&M policy over the last 7 years. It is the systematic removal of access to opportunities. It is the systematic removal of interventions that allow persons, places to work, places to earn an income that is outside of crime and violence. It is the systematic removal of the access or opportunities in terms of education, and that includes technical vocational education, things that they are now trying to bring back today because they have seen that these are consequences of their actions. In some cases, we've seen inaction causing things, but this is a systematic and deliberate removal of targeted interventions put in place between 2010 and 2015, some of them even before, that assisted the most vulnerable in our society to create a space for opportunities that you can earn a living in this country. Now that they've taken it away and we are seeing the results of that, they are telling us we should only be afraid if the shooting happens inside the school. And so Trinidad and Tobago, let Roodal RC School be a wake-up call for us, a clarion call to every right-thinking citizen in this country. We have been facing issues of infrastructural neglect. We have been facing issues high unemployment. We have been facing issues of the crash of our economy, while all the while being told things are well, things are going well, don't worry about it. We are seeing clearly now everything is good. But now that we know that our babies, our children, are hiding under desks when they go to school because there are bullets flying on about right or near the school. Don't wait for it to happen in your community. Don't believe that it will not happen in other communities around Trinidad and Tobago, because it is knocking on all of our doors and they have no answer. It is clear from the Minister of National Security's response and from the glaring silence of the Minister of Education, the absence of the Prime Minister. All of these persons who usually have a lot to say about all kinds of nonsense have absolutely nothing to say now, because they have recognized that they have failed and they will continue to fail because they are incapable of running this country. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Anita, for the very comprehensive overview of developments in the surrounding that horrendous situation at the school and the responses of the Minister of National Security. I think that the point is well made that we are now on the verge where, as you said, the government is ceding territory. And this has happened in other CARICOM territories. It has happened, of course, outside of the region as well. And is a hallmark of failed states when the government surrenders territory to criminal elements who then become political warlords by themselves, because in a way they now trespass on state power. And that, I believe, is a very important observation. Remind me of many years ago when there was a showdown between a UNC government and the religious group in Port of Spain. And then Prime Minister Mr. Pandey made it clear that in Trinidad and Tobago there'll only be one government. They can't have two.
Yes.
And there was a Saturday morning showdown, and that was the central issue. And that issue has come back now under this PNM administration, that gangs and what they represent are on the verge of taking territory. And I think that's a very, very serious observation that you made there. Members of the press, this morning, I would speak on a few matters involving housing, works and transport, some issues on crime, and of course, just to update the country and to take the argument further on that dreaded nightmare of Nelson Gate that this country has faced and will face for decades to come on that matter, and the very serious implication of the Nelson Gate matter on the politicization of the prosecutorial process. I think that's the term used today, actually. by a writer in the newspaper that we have now reached a phase where, in the aftermath of what had happened with former Chief Justice Satyanarayana Sharma, that we have politicized prosecution. And that has a very serious impact on undermining the integrity and credibility of the criminal justice system and the judiciary. And I say that in light, as the writer observed, of the return of the Brazilian president, who was actually incarcerated on matters surrounding corruption, money laundering, and so on. But related as well to the politicization of prosecution, which we have seen here in this Nelson Gate matter. I would just say in passing, because Anita dealt with it really in a comprehensive manner, that like the rest of the country, we were shocked and in awe and in disbelief. This is why we asked the minister in Parliament on Friday whether or not they were his words, because one could not believe that the minister would actually believe that. He did not deny, very importantly, he did not deny that. And in the press, quite rightly, in the press, just to use some of the language used in the press, they described his remarks and his Facebook posting as perplexing, astonishingly tone-deaf, insensitive, emotionally numb, flying in the face of reason. And I don't want to continue for the rest of the morning describing him. But I think Minister Haynes has reached a stage now where he has an immunity to embarrassment. He has now an immunity he has developed to embarrassment. While his Prime Minister has not developed immunity to COVID, he has developed immunity to embarrassment. And I think if there are about 100 more editorials about Fitzgerald Haynes, nothing will change. So I want to alert the press that I don't know what these editorials will do in terms of changing anything as it relates to Mr. Haynes, because he's immune. He's immune. To me, I will close by saying that this is a gentleman who indicated that the children were not under, and then passed the buck to police, but he said the children were not under any imminent threat, danger. But yet, when he was in the beat-em and two young persons kicked water on him, he ran from water. Correct. He ran not from bullet, he ran from water. To the police station. When he later accused the Member of Parliament for Puchis as raising statements in Parliament, and he felt threatened in the Parliament with 100 police. He felt threatened by the Member for Puchis, who he accused of making a statement, and took me to the Privilege Committee, I believe. Yeah. He took me to the Privilege Committee because he said he felt threatened. But the children are ducking from bullets, and they are hearing it clearly, as we all did. He said, no, they're not under any immediate danger. But he ran from water. I leave that there for now. I wanted to update the country and the media on developments on Friday in the Parliament. It had been a most significant day. It began and ended in disbelief. We began where MP Saddam Hussein had filed a motion for urgent public importance on the crime matter, on the murder rate and the prevalence of crime. And remarkably, the Speaker ruled that he did not satisfy the requirement of the standing order and rejected that motion, and further rejected that who proposed that, Mr. Saddam Hussein, was not even allowed to read it, which is something relatively new in our Parliament. In days gone by, when Mr. Sinanan and others had been Speaker, they allowed you to read your motion and then they would decide whether or not it qualifies. We're in a situation where the UNC MPs are not even allowed to read their motion, and Mr. Saddam Hussein raised that, and we congratulate him on raising that matter and having the courage and the honor to raise it on behalf of the United National Congress. The matter that ended the sitting, I must now add, was a matter on the adjournment concerning this HDC matter. And I just wanted to update the country on this situation and to share just one more document that came into our possession, but came into our possession late, so that we did not have the benefit of sharing it last week when we spoke. But during the week, there was a development. Senator Wade Mark asked the chairman of the HDC, Noel Garcia, on this matter. Mr. Garcia responded, and it was in the press, a committee, I believe, on appropriation and public administration. He said no decision had been taken by the HDC, none, concerning this project. I have in my hand here a map, and this is a document from the HDC. This is an HDC document proposed site area, 3rd Street, San Fernando, to construct multi-story residential units. It's called a drawing title, Preliminary Conceptual Site Plan. And I asked the HDC, how much money have you spent so far on technical and professional companies, consultants, to undertake work in an area which you claim you haven't decided yet whether to build houses, because the technical part of this work is also very expensive. Could you imagine that they propose to build 3 apartment blocks? I have it right here. 3 apartment blocks. What appears to be 20-30 feet from a main road. And what is certain, we know of it, we know the topology, it is a hill. They are going to build on a hill. I tell the members of the press this morning, this is Las Alturas II. They are going to build on a hill, on a slope. In fact, in the last budget, Minister Imbert actually increased the amount of money for a particular housing settlement program. So when we ask why you increase the money, he said because building on a hill is more expensive. We have estimated from our work in HDC and the housing, if you attempt to do this, this will cost more or less $60 to $80 million only in infrastructure. You are going to pile next to main road, which could be a few feet. This is not a big distance off. Most HDC sites are 200 meters or so away from a road because you drive into a site generally. This is off the main road, which you are going to pile on a hill. You're going to build, unlike Monrepo and other areas in San Fernando, Pleasantville and so on. This is on a slope. This slope could be about 60 to 80 feet going down the hill onto a recreation ground. As I told you last week, I spent 7 years here. I used to go there to retrieve wind ball and so on when it lost in the bushes. So I know here. And they are going to build the tree. Look at it. They have already done work already. And apart from the green space and so on, which we all know about, they are creating serious problems as they did in Las Alturas when they went and blew up the hill to build houses. And we had to repair the damage and clean up the mess. I remember that well. There was a commission of inquiry. This will lead to Las Alturas II. You cannot imagine the amount of money to do infrastructure on lands like this, located near main road like this, apart from the issue of overcrowded. Just 2 matters I want to say. On Friday, when I raised the matter on the adjournment, the government response was very simple. They said, listen, we hear you, but the Minister of Education gives permission. The Minister of Education, in a 2-line letter, said, I have no objection. Now, if you give the Minister of Education a map, she cannot find 3rd Street in San Fernando. If you give a map. I invite the Minister of Education this morning. Could you join me, please, as the Shadow Minister of Housing? Join me for what could be just 15 minutes of a site visit on 3rd Street, San Fernando. I will meet you anytime, in the day, not in the night. I will meet you, and let us go and visit this site. Bring 1 or 2 people with you. I will bring 1 or 2 people. And discuss whether this is practical or just an act of madness on behalf of the government. And let me be very clear. Camille Robinson-Regis says, Friday gone, she says, listen, we take the minister word. Notwithstanding, 4 months later, the permanent secretary, we showed the letters, gave a detailed synopsis of the area, outlined that it is in a school zone, outlined those schools are more than 50 years old. They need more facilities, outlined that the trouble in terms of noise, disruption, construction, people are making 2 points in the public domain, which I quickly want to say. At this stage, I'm not on to voter padding and so on. We can argue that at some time. If you want a voter pad, Mrs. Robinson-Regis, you could do it easily. I don't want to advise you on it, but there are other places in San Fernando. The waterfront project that you all are taking 7 years to build has provided space for housing. So if you're really about voter padding, go voter pad down by a hotel down on the wharf somewhere there. I won't call the name. Go down there and voter pad. Nothing is wrong if that is your objective. But when I talk about this, it's not only the matter of voter padding. It has absolutely nothing to do with, I see some people raising issue of race and so on. We built homes all over this country. We completed, the partnership government completed all the homes in current settlement in current San Fernando. We did the work since in Monrepo. We extended and did a refurbishment and repair work in Monrepo, San Fernando. and so on. This has nothing to do with race. This has to do with you are disrupting a school zone with 7 schools in the area. You are taking away the few bit of green space that still remain there in a congested area. This area, we showed a map, I believe, last week, so it's in the public domain. I don't want to spend too much time. I read something in the paper where a paid communication man at the office of the Prime Minister saying what we fear. Look at this map. They are speaking as if San Fernando is depopulated. It has no house there. So we have to populate the city because we have a new Skinner Park and a Sapa. So we need people. San Fernando is one of the most overcrowded cities in the CARICOM. San Fernando is, I believe we have 23,000 people in a small city center. And there are enormous residential areas. Todd Street is one. Look at this. Cipero Street. All over San Fernando is residence. In fact, over there, Drayton Street, Cipero Street, Rushford Street, Lewis Street, all over San Fernando is residence. Don't speak on this matter as if we need people in San Fernando. We have nobody living there. It's depopulated. You know what I mean? Don't do that. San Fernando is already overcrowded. So when we suggest to you, you have Golconda, Phase 3, you have Retrench, you have Current. On the opposite side of the highway to Current, where we have the Teachers Training College, there are lands available there easily. You can get a hectare of land there to do this. And that is within 5 to 7 minutes of city center San Fernando. So we are not on to the matter that we don't want houses. We built houses in Fairfield, Princestown, in Union Hall, in Chaguanas, and the East-West Corridor. We built all over. We repaired and did enormous work in Laventille and San Fernando and Arima and Point Fortin, the Partnership Administration. So I want to tell our detractors on this simple matter, this has nothing to do with the population of San Fernando. So what you want to do, build a house next to Sapa so people could cross the road and go to a concert? All over the world, people would take a little taxi or a ride, a tram or train or something and go to the concert, the football match and so on. So you want people to live over the road from Skinner Park? That is what they are saying. And Camille Robinson Regis has said that, look, we're not about the permanent secretary. In fact, we don't know who the permanent secretary is. We don't care. We're about the minister, and the constitution gives the minister power. And that matter, I close by saying on that matter, it will go to the courthouse, and Mr. Garcia and Ms. Robinson Regis will do their 100-page defense and go to court and explain that to a court in due course. The next matter I just wanted to raise concerns this matter of the office of the Prime Minister. Now what happened is when our hard-working colleagues in the lower house had been involved in what is called a finance committee meeting for one entire week, Anita, you remember, yes, we asked questions day and night to ministries. The time has come now where they could run, but most of them can't hide. So on Friday, they released information to us in the Parliament. They released information pursuant to questions we were asking in the Parliament during that one intensive week of questioning day and night. In fact, some of us get tired too when we hear questions, coming. But it was worth it in that today we now have in our hand documents. And I want to share with you a few documents received. We have not received from all ministries. That Ministry of the Attorney General is still hiding. They're still hiding. We have given them, I think, until Monday or Tuesday to produce their answers. But I remember asking a question to the Minister of Communications, Office of the Prime Minister, and my question was simple. It related to TTT, Trinidad and Tobago Television Company Limited, and I have been a former Minister of Communications myself under another regime, the Pandey regime, and I asked, could you indicate the revenue collected from political parties in fiscal 2022 by TTT for end political meetings? I asked for the list of political broadcasts, the payments made, and any payments outstanding, which is a simple way of asking questions and so on. Lo and behold, remarkably, we got the answer. The answer is, and I have it right here in my hand, the list of political broadcasts aired by TTT is as follows. November 2021, PNM broadcasts. November, December 2021, PNM broadcasts. I ain't seen another party yet, huh? December 2021, PNM Tobago meeting. April 2022, PNM Diego Martin meeting. We go on. August 2022, PNM Belmont meeting. September 2022, PNM Mount Hope meeting. Now they only stop there because that's when the fiscal year ends. Otherwise we'll continue. So it is amazing. We don't have any meeting of the UNC, the PDP, the ABC, the XYZ. No party again is being facilitated this way. So we'll continue. Answer to my question part B. And the question was the payments made by TTT, which is a state enterprise run by taxpayers' money. No payments have been made to date. So the PNM is using TTT as a FRICO mouthpiece for their political meetings live. No payments made today. Outstanding payments not applicable. So what is happening here? Is TTT an arm, a constitutional arm of the PNM? That today you take millions of dollars to fund TTT as a taxpayer and they are providing free political broadcasts to the PNM administration. This is scandalous and I call upon the Minister of Communications to please respond to this and tell us if this is a typographical error and so on. I call on them because this is scandalous. The other matter I'll raise, and many matters in this Office of the Prime Minister report will be raised on a subsequent meeting tomorrow night. Remind you of the Monday night forum tomorrow night will be live as well, not on TTT. So they gave us, we asked another question concerning payments made on projects undertaken by UDCOT, outstanding payments on these projects. And I want to just deal with one, and other speakers will deal with more of this matter tomorrow night at the Monday night forum. Construction of the Prime Minister's Tobago residence. Now, why I deal with this is because I was minister in charge of UDCOT for 5 years or so. And the Tobago residence was a matter under UDCOT. And I recall going to the Prime Minister, the Honorable Kamala Persad-Bissessar, and indicating to her that UDCOT had done a study of repairing and refurbishing the Tobago property of Prime Minister's residence. When I went to see Mrs. Persad-Bissessar, she says, yes. I said, Madam Prime Minister, we have now a document from UDCOT, and the document is telling us that we can do the construction, the refurbishment. She said, what is the cost? I said, $20 million. I can't remember the words she used, but I can paraphrase. I think she asked me if I was mad. It may not have been the words, but it was the effect of what she was saying. And Mrs. Persad-Bissessar, Prime Minister, said, do you want to spend $20 million at a time when we had a challenge with commodity prices 2014, 15? Do you want to spend $20 million on a residence for the Prime Minister in Tobago? Or would you not find that that money would be better spent in our social development programs, in our infrastructure programs, and bringing relief to citizens in the communities, in the villages? So I told her, I said, Madam, I just tell you what the UDCOT said, because I then had to mitigate against running further risk to myself. So I indicated to her that, okay, I understand the position. We will indicate to UDCOT that they either reduce that budget from 20 million or we shelve that work, we postpone to a time when we will have resources in the future. When the PNM came in power, Dr. Rowley was paranoid about fixing this residence in Tobago, because as we now know, that is a hideaway. That is the hideaway. So they came with a budget. I can remember because we were interrogating every year. $25 million for the Office of the Prime Minister and residence in Tobago. Initial budget, $25 million. $5 million more than UDCOT told us when we were there, but we said, well, the price of brick and concrete and then gone up, so we don't know. Do you know today we can confirm that the UDCOT cost for the Prime Minister's Tobago residence is now in the vicinity of $63 million. They have certified to pay $48.7 million with another unpaid balance of $15.4 million. I call for a public independent inquiry into the refurbishment and construction of the Prime Minister's Tobago residence. Something cannot have started at $25 million and end up to $63 million for a residence, a second residence. The Prime Minister has an official residence at the Diplomatic Center. That is the Prime Minister's residence. If you go to your village where you come from and so on, you have your private residence and so on, there. A Tobago residence cost $63 million plus that was budgeted at $25 million. This is another scandal that we must expose, flesh out in real terms and in real time. We must find out who are the contractors that did work there. Are we aware that to pave a road, what was 100 meters, 150 meters, took out $4 million by a Tobago contractor, well known to the Prime Minister? They speak about us that we build prison fence and so on, as if a prison fence is a fence that Karaili does go on, Karaili vine does spread. A prison fence is an extremely technical and sophisticated installation that must confine to international standards and so on. They complain about the prison fence in Golden Grove. Here it is $63 million plus for a residence of the Prime Minister in Tobago. This is a scandal that we will continue to deal with, ladies and gentlemen. Ladies and gentlemen, I'll move on very quickly now to a couple matters on crime and the CCTV camera. Minister Young has said in the Parliament that he believes that I have an obsession with CCTV cameras for one reason or another. I have an obsession with accountability. I have an obsession with transparency. I have an obsession with government taking responsibility. That is my obsession. I have no business interest in CCTV camera. People who know me know I can't even sell this shirt on my back. I can't buy it and I can't sell it. I'm not into business that way. But I want to say, and add to what Anita said earlier, we asked a question in the Parliament to the Ministry of National Security. Could you provide details on the rollout of the National Crime Prevention Program? Because they had a budget. The answer is the program is being reviewed. And that is really the crisis we face. It's a crisis of competence and corruption. It is being reviewed, and the National Crime Prevention Program is still under review. So what do you expect? When we ask questions, could you provide us with the number of functional vehicles available to law enforcement? It is remarkable that the ministry and the PNM government is saying that for safety, national security concerns, we cannot tell you how much vehicles functional. You know what they're saying? They're saying if we tell you how much vehicles not functional, crime might go up from the low rate it is now. That is what they're saying here. That is the absurdity of what they are saying. If we tell you how much vehicles are not functioning, criminals might find out and decide, you know, they can increase crime. This is how the Ministry of National Security, under the clueless and hapless Fitzgerald Ettenberg Haynes, operates. And the CCTV camera now. I will just raise that before the Nelson Gate matter, and then I close off. All I wanted to say on the CCTV camera is that when the story broke of their bungling, their incompetence and their corruption, it was 2019, 18th of January 2019, in the Parliament on what was then a standing committee report debate. I raised matters on this issue. I'm talking about 2019. It came to my attention at the end of 2018 that in September 2018 there was a major tendering process for new cameras and new systems and so on. And without reading this is a matter of public record. Anybody interested, I imagine, can get it and read it. I raised this issue. A CCTV network tender went out with an RFP for proposals and so on. And it was scheduled to close on September 7, 2018 at 1:30 p.m. The closing date and time were announced to all bidders and so on before. September 7th, 1:30 p.m. All bidders signed their tender, they put it in. The chairman of the Special Tenders Committee and so on was involved in that. All parties who were bidding submitted their bids except one company, a company known as Integrated Microwave Technology Limited, trading as Whistling. They did not submit anything. Lo and behold, September 2018, a decision was taken by unknown persons to extend the deadline from September 7th to September 21st. That's the first act of corruption. You cannot extend a deadline for a bid when the deadline is coming to an end a few minutes before it ends. upon submission, no tender register was available for signature. That was a clause in the agreement. Do you know when they went to drop tendering their tender documents, they didn't have a register to sign. So that meant that people couldn't put the date and time that they are putting it in on an official document. They did not have register. And the chronology of events are amazing. Participants were informed at 1:45. Now 1:30 was the cutoff date, cutoff time. 1:30 cutoff time. At 1:45, 15 minutes after box closed, they were informed via email that this $100 million contract, more or less, that the officers of the SSA Procurement Department has sent an email to the Ministry of National Security saying that there's a new deadline of September 21st. So on September 7th, when the deadline gone, they then find out that, hello, you have 14 days again, man, what you hustle for? This is when they open everybody documents and already saw their bid. They extended. That was a matter of gross corruption that we will investigate one day to come, very soon. So they continued with this. So we said September 21st is the new deadline. People quarrel, but they said if this happens, well, this reminds you of the UDCOT bidding as well for the Central Block. We had the same problem. So, in fact, Digicel, and I wanted the population to note, Digicel in particular noted that the technical submissions of themselves and other bidders had been opened. It had been opened at the deadline, and then they extended it. They extended this deadline to September 21. So this by itself was an act of corruption. When September 21 came and it passed, I asked again, what happened? They then said, hello, they canceled everything. They're going to January 2019. January 2019 come and gone, and then we were informed in the parliament that they went through some process, and a Canadian bidder who came from nowhere now won a tender to supply only the camera, but not the system. All along, I'm moving along, all along, Mr. Stuart Young and others were saying in the parliament their favorite mantra, that under the UNC and partnership, cameras move from $10,000 for one to $12,000 with price per camera increase, and this was too much money for TSTT. TSTT, as a state majority owned company, was managing this. They undermined the own state company, TSTT, failed to respond to TSTT, failed to continue dialogue with TSTT to extend their contracts and so on. It was extended, but not through a formal contract. It was on a month-to-month and so on. For many years, I believe. But they did not want to do business with TSTT. Why? Why you don't want to do business with a state enterprise where taxpayers will benefit from their revenue and their income? Anyway, they continue. They quarrel with us, quarrel. It was too expensive and the partnership had signed contracts. Today, Dr. Rowley announced, as if it's some bombshell announcement, the increase in CCTV cameras. This is 6 years in the making. He announced as if it's something great. $80 million for 2,500 cameras. You know the cost? People work it out. Anybody with a calculator, their phone work it out. Around $32,000 per camera. So you complain that the partnership was $12,000 in 2011, 2012. $12,000. Today you have a whopping $32,000 per camera. We call on the government to answer a few questions. Busy. Mr. Haynes, what type of cameras are these? What are the specs of these cameras? Because we are informed by law enforcement officials that they have concerns about the specs of the cameras, in that the cameras cannot give you the pixel or whatever they call it, Anita, these technical terms, but they cannot give you the pictures that would be of evidential value in a court of law. So that sometimes we have cameras in our home and so on, but it cannot pick up number plate properly. It cannot do face recognition in a scientific way. Face recognition carries scientific elements. Because if you have to prove somebody in a court of law, it has to be certified by international agencies, and your camera system must be up to a certain standard, and so on. I call on the minister to tell us, or will they say, well, in national security, we can't tell if the camera could pick up face or not. I mean, what is that? So face recognition is very important. This is why, although every day we see pictures, every morning and evening you get video of people robbing here, shooting here, hijacking here, 90% of that cannot be used. because you don't have face recognition in a scientific way. You cannot make out properly number plate. You cannot go to a court with that type of thing. Today I ask, what are the specs of these cameras? Are they specs that will allow information and pictures, photographs and depiction and images to be used in a court of law? For $32,000, what are we getting? Is it a camera? Is it an operation system? Is it maintenance? What type of contract? Then I ask my second round of questions. What process has been in place to obtain this through an open tendering approach, where persons will have an opportunity to bid, and you have an independent organization and so on, neutral people will look at it and evaluate and come up with a winner of the bid. What process is being used? Because this government has a history of undermining tendering processes all around the place, but as it relates to CCTV cameras. September 2018, September 7, 2018, 1:30 p.m. will be an infamous date and time that we will investigate why it is that SSA sent National Security an email and tell them extend the bid. Who did not submit a bid in time that you wanted to extend for? These are the issues surrounding CCTV camera. What is the $80 million for? And they must answer that, because it is not enough to say the Prime Minister called a papi show meeting. He brought the entire executive of the police service to the diplomatic lounge. Their only job there was to identify whether they're having vegetarian or meat. That was what they went there to do, to have a food, take a light refreshment or so, and leave. At the end of it, they came up with CCTV cameras. For 6 years, we're trying to increase CCTV cameras. And I just want to repeat, because we forget, it was the partnership government that increased the coverage of CCTV cameras. CCTV cameras in this country, brothers and sisters of the press, is really linked to the Summit of the Americas. When under the Manning administration in 2008 or thereabout, we hosted the Summit of the Americas. 800 cameras we put in Port of Spain and surrounding areas for CCTV camera. We increased that to 1,400, including 80, I believe, in Tobago. We then increased it to 1,500 before we left office. Today, they have 1,796. So in 7 years, they increased CCTV coverage by a meager 200 cameras. And on Friday last, Mr. Haynes said that out of that, 1,023 or something working, but the rest are non-functional. So you cannot fix about 800 CCTV cameras. When that tragedy happened with our sister Andrea Barrett, I believe, January a few years ago, police reported that had the cameras in that area been operational, they could have moved swiftly to possibly save her life and rescue her. That is a matter of fact. That's on the record in national security. And the tragedy is, to this day, they have done precious little. So $32,000 a camera. That is what they are saying. The Prime Minister announced that recently. They failed to say what type of contract it is, what type of cameras they're using. They failed to indicate that when they came into office, people will recall, they dismantled the National Operations Center. Because of course they don't want to do that. That was Gary Griffith and Mrs. Prasad Bissessa work. We formed that when we were there. Dismantled that so that today they have no operations center. So even if you get footage on a CCTV camera, who are you sending it to in real time? Yesterday in our neighborhood somewhere in South, somebody put up a picture of what appears to be a lady in a motor vehicle being held within the vehicle by someone. Citizens had to quickly call the police and give them a number for that vehicle. And it looks suspicious. We have the video. Citizens had to report that to the police. Vehicle number so and so and so. A lady appears to be being held. She appears that she's been violently held in a vehicle and she wants to come out. Citizens did that. They have no CCTV camera working around there that you can pick up that in real time at a central command center. Send it in real time to a patrol car that within a minute or so can reach the offending car. That is what we are talking about. And I want to make this point, people are writing in the newspaper. I read something this morning. Everybody, because you see, to blame the PNM and the UNC means you're independent, you're neutral. Somehow you just get cookie points. That's called cookie
brownie points.
What?
Brownie points.
Brownie points. I don't know too much about that. Somehow you just get brownie points if you blame the PNM and the UNC in one breath. So people now write, well, the PNM have no policy, but the UNC only criticizing them Mrs. Prasad Bisesa spent enormous time just last week, Monday, speaking about national security and some strategic ideas and policies on reforming the institution to deal with the fight against crime. Just last week, Monday, I was there, I heard her. People writing in the papers say the UNC have no policy. But if you take a bucket of policy and throw it on their head, they will still say the UNC have no policy. That is because they feel that somehow if you criticize the PNM and you don't criticize the UNC, you don't get the brownie points at the end of the day. So that's what they're fishing for now. They're fishing for that. And we understand that pathology as well. I understand that pathology. You don't have the courage. You don't have the, well, I won't say that, but you won't have the stature. You don't have the gravitas to call a spade a spade. So what you do is you call everybody spade. I understand the psychology of that as well. So I will leave this there. And closing now, I will make just 2 points on the Nelson Gate matter. Very serious matter, because I think the population may not have heard of it. The Nelson Gate matter. There's a gentleman in the government by the name of Stuart Young. He believes he's Harry Houdini. He believes he's Houdini, that he can escape from anything he can escape from. But he cannot escape from an allegation made by Vincent Nelson. In his documents, his statement of case, Mr. Nelson says that he was on a flight. We did the records and so on, and we checked it. We believe it's March 2nd, 2020. There was a flight leaving Piaco, British Airways flight, going to London Gatwick through St. Lucia. And Mr. Stuart Young was on the flight. Mr. Nelson was on the flight. And Mr. Nelson is saying in his claim, he's saying this, so he's going to court on this, you know. He's saying that Mr. Stuart Young approached him to have a conversation. He said that Mr. Stuart Young, this was after the sentencing, Mr. Stuart Young came to his seat to converse. And he said Stuart Young informed him that the statement, notarized statement, had been disclosed. Stuart Young said that people are telling him that it was disclosed by him. He's telling Nelson on the plane, I didn't do that. I didn't do that. People telling you, not people, Alwari, because they are throwing each other under the bus now. So Alwari, it was alleged that Alwari told Nelson that Stuart Young would sell him out to the British. Stuart Young is saying on this flight that I won't be so stupid because I know it would be a breach of the agreement. I think he would be so stupid. I honestly believe he would be so stupid. He's telling Nelson in a conversation on a flight. Nelson is a man who is a bombshell key witness in a criminal matter involving a former attorney general and political opponent of this government, former senator. He goes to his seat on the plane, walk up to him and say, how you going, sir? Can I talk to you for a few minutes? Yes, I can. Alwari tell you that I leaked the thing to England. It's not me. I'm not so stupid. I knew it would be a breach of the agreement. And Mr. Young has not denied this to this day. He has not denied this. He has not denied disclosing it either. But he has not denied this. He was in a plane with a witness, tampering, meddling, interfering. You remember the charge Satnarayan Sharma, because he was alleged to have been speaking to a lawyer, not a witness. He was alleged to have been speaking to a lawyer on a plane about the Pandey matter. And I think it was a plane as well, you know. Something about these planes. You have to be careful. I must keep that in mind in the future. If I say a witness or a lawyer, I take the next flight. You don't want to be on a plane with them. But Mr. Young wants to escape this. He has to speak on whether this is true or not. Whether Mr. Nelson and him had a conversation on the case and a critical part of the case, because Nelson is where he is today because that notarized statement was sent to England. Alwari says Young. Young says not me, I'm not that stupid. Nelson put it in his case. And to this day, they are trying to hide from that. They are also trying to hide from a next matter, my final matter. It was also reported in Mr. Nelson's documents that he had it from Mr. Alwari and others, from his lawyer and so on, that they had made arrangements. The government of Trinidad and Tobago had agreed. He has a text message to this effect. Huh? I think I have to take a sip of water before I say this one. Text message of 18 June 2019. Nelson said his TT attorney confirmed that the government of Trinidad and Tobago had agreed on granting of a pardon to Nelson after his conviction. And they said that was their understanding from the then Attorney General, that the pardon would be approved within 1 month from the sentence. Now, Nelson has to be a fool to trust the PNM, but that's another matter. Further to the approval of the pardon within 1 month, he was told that the agreement of the necessary members of the pardon committee would be granted. The pardon committee would grant him a pardon, and it would be sufficient to get a recommendation accepted, thereby representing the authority and so the Attorney General then said with authority and confidence, of which he's a member of that pardon committee, that they had already done the work to secure a pardon, a presidential pardon. Today I call now on the President's office, indicate whether or not Her Excellency Paula May Weeks was involved in this matter, whether the President had knowledge that a pardon had already been discussed and agreed upon to come to her to sign off, because the President, of course, has to sign the presidential pardon, and she has to examine it, as presidents do, to see the bona fide, to make sure this thing satisfies. When you give a pardon, it's not a joke that you just put John Smith on a piece of paper and say, look, that fella was planting bygone and yam by the prison. Set him out. There are strict conditions and criteria to do that, including a lot of work in the judiciary. I'll come to that now. So we are asking the President to indicate whether or not she was part and parcel of granting a presidential pardon to Mr. Vincent Nelson that had already been agreed upon, it appears, by the pardon committee. Whether or not the President's office was involved in this, like the merit list. This is what happened with the merit list. It went to the President's office instead of going to Parliament. Dr. Rowley went and intercepted it and said, no, throw that away, we don't want that. So the President's office became embroiled in that scandal. To this day, it continues because there's a court matter now. So we want to know if the President's office is also involved in the granting of a pardon to Vincent Nelson. And it may explain, you all will recall last year, or was it last year or this year? This year, 2022, when we had a controversy in the media that judges were being put out of the court of justice because the judicial officers were working overtime. They wanted to pardon 60 in 60. 60 prisoners in 60 years as part of independence. I asked whether or not Mr. Vincent Nelson was one out of the 60 persons earmarked to be pardoned by the President as part of this sordid affair. Whether Vincent Nelson was indeed identified in the 60 to be pardoned for independence, because they would have pushed his name in the pack. So you just push his name, and when you read it, well, you say, well, he from somewhere, San Fernando or somewhere. We don't know who's that. And you go on with a pardon. This is akin to a controversy, a scandal beyond words. That the President's office could have been involved in a conspiracy to induce a witness in a criminal matter by way of granting a presidential pardon. I am hoping that the President could say, I know nothing of that. It never came to my attention. I don't know who's that. I'm hoping so. Otherwise, it speaks to the undermining of one of the highest offices in the land on this matter of the presidential pardon. So, I think we have said enough for the moment, but to take some questions from the press now at this time, I'll leave it there for now. Thank you all very much for your attention.
Thank you. We have some questions coming in. The first one to Ms. Haynes. Ms. Haynes, according to the Minister of National Security, the Roodal Primary School implemented that duck and cover method for months now, because this problem in gang violence has been going on for a while. Yet the Minister himself said that he only became aware of this serious issue when the video came out. Do you think that if this video had not come out and gone viral, that this issue would have been addressed?
Absolutely not. I am of the firm belief that had this video not made its way into the public domain, this conversation would not be happening at all. Whether or not they knew about it becomes irrelevant, because the government has been very clear and very insistent on protecting itself. They leave citizens to fend for themselves, but when it comes to protecting the image of the government in whatever little way that they can, they attempt to do that. Look, we are aware as a nation what has been going on in Trinidad and Tobago for quite some time. gun violence, gang violence, multiple shootings, children getting caught up in gang violence in Trinidad and Tobago. But we are also painfully aware that the Minister of National Security has told us quite clearly it is not his job to make Trinidadians and Tobagonians feel safe. He said that on national TV. And so his statements are in no way surprising. His lack of proactive measures is in no way surprising. And as I raised in my presentation earlier today, the complete and utter absence of any kind of all of government approach. Because when you're talking about knowing that gang violence and this duck and cover has been going on for quite some time, and now hearing that the ministry, after seeing the video, would be looking at ensuring that these students and teachers have some access to counseling and to deal with the trauma of it all, means that if it does not come to light, and who knows where else it is happening, because there are a number of schools in a number of areas where we know gang violence to be taking place. How many other schools is this happening, and without the due diligence of regular citizens, average Trinidadians and Tobagonians, we would be left in the dark, and the government will still remain feckless and policyless as it were.
Mr. Haynes has said that the police has given him the assurance that the school would be reopened safely come next week Monday. Do you have confidence that that will be the case?
Minister Haynes has been, from the beginning of his tenure, trying to put the police at the forefront of policy decisions, right? The police will give everybody the assurance, as it is their job. Their job is to protect and serve. So without a doubt, right, there would be more police in the areas, etc. But as I raised the point earlier, unless at the top, unless you remember the picture of the National Security Council meeting recently to say that they are trying to find some way. I mean, Dr. Moonilal raised their crime prevention plan, all of these things. They're revising it and whatnot. The failure is at the top, and so that we ought not to let Haynes get away with trying to put everything in between himself and the responsibility that he holds. And if he's unable to do the job that he's given, he should be fired or at least have the decency to resign.
There has been some talk that this school should be perhaps relocated from the area, given the level of violence.
But when we raise that here, there is an inherent danger of the government ceding space to gangs and gang violence. And therefore, what we should be very focused on is removing the gangs from the area. And if you are telling me as a nation, we are all admitting that that is an impossible thing to do, or it cannot be done, and therefore we must result in moving the school. So what are we going to start to do? Find law-abiding citizens and move all the law-abiding citizens into one part of the country and hope for the best? What, are we going to build a wall? I mean, really and truly, that is an unsustainable solution, if indeed it is a solution at all. The solution to this problem is to get the people who are in charge. If they are unable to treat for the crime situation, they ought not to be in charge. Peace Rowley himself said so.
Dr. Moonilal, with regards to the proposed development of Todd Street in San Fernando, are you aware if any contracts have already been awarded to anyone in this?
No, in fact, that is why this morning we are asking the HDC to indicate to us what contracts have been awarded, which consultants have been hired, and the terms and conditions for hiring consultants to do what they call preliminary work on the site. But we are already seeing drawings and sketches and so on appearing at the HDC. So clearly there must be some work that is taking place.
You mentioned some costs already. Given your experience as Minister of Housing, what is your estimate that this project may cost next year?
This project, given the price of materials and the infrastructure for this project would rise to about $50 million or so, given the slope, given the area. And for those 3 buildings, I wouldn't be surprised that under the PNM, this could be a $200 million project of some kind.
With regards to the comments made by the Minister of Education, can the Minister legally ignore the recommendations
What I would say is that the matter clearly is heading for the courts, and the minister will be hard pressed, because you see, the minister believes that I am the minister. The constitution says I'm in charge. But when you go to a court of law, you can't tell the court I'm in charge. You could tell the parliament that. When you go there, you have to explain your decision must be a reasonable discretion. Decision. It must be based on some analysis. It must be based on some technical report. When a minister gives an opinion on something, you can't wake up in the morning, drink 2 sips of tea and say, okay, I feel it so. It has to be based on advice. It has to be based on opinion. I asked the Minister of Education, who advised you? What opinion you use? Clearly it's not the permanent secretary. Clearly it's not tongue and country planning. So who informed you? Did you sleep and somebody came in your dream and tell you this is a good idea, we have no objection? It doesn't work like that. A minister's decision, although you have the authority of the Constitution, it is driven by certain legal principles. For example, you must exercise your judgment in a manner that is reasonable. You must exercise discretion in a manner that is fair. That is the basis of law. That is the basis of legal decision making. And this minister believed that by taking a piece of paper from the cashier by KFC and writing something behind it and say, I agree. It doesn't work like that in the real world. You can tell Parliament you're in charge. Don't go in the Court of Justice and tell people you're in charge. You will get charged. So I wanted to just make 2 points before taking the next question. Somebody has sent a question to me as well, and I just wanted to say that matter of TSTT is now in the Daily Express of today, the editorial page 14, and it gives a synopsis and a chronology of that CCTV camera. And without reading it before, they actually said September 7, 2018 was when that happened, according to my Hansard record. But the point that I would just want to raise from this editorial is that the editorial is saying that this matter has been a sordid affair, controversy, corruption, and so on. But recently, the government indicated that Digicel was awarded a contract to install 2,500 cameras, more or less, while the lowest bidder in that arrangement was TSTT. So TSTT was the lowest bidder, and they were disqualified for a higher bidder to get the contract. Rowley himself said that was a problem, and he had put the Attorney General, Reginald Amor, who is apologizing every week now for something. They put the Attorney General to review it. What is the outcome of the review? We asked the Attorney General if you could, for once tell us in a straightforward and accurate manner, what is the outcome of this report that you are doing, this investigation into this blotched tendering process where TSTT, the lowest bidder, was disqualified and a higher bidder awarded? Tell us now, after all this time, what is the review? What did the review say? Because they are proceeding to do an award for $80 million with no details regarding when the award was made, to whom, under what approach, what method was used to award it. There's still secrecy. They lack transparency and disclosure on this critical matter, and the handling of TSTT is a crisis by itself. You see, the government had targeted TSTT to undermine them, to close it down, to privatize TSTT. This is why they did not want TSTT get into a position where they could have made more revenue, declared profits, and so on. The government was always on a campaign of undermining TSTT, a state enterprise, for some other reason. I would only add one matter again raised in a question to me, if you don't mind. Somebody asked this question. Dr. Rowley has said that the cabinet was not involved in the Nelson Gate matter. Let me make the point clearly. Dr. Rowley believes that nobody except the PNM never appear in government. They behave as if none of us never see government before. We have spent a lot of time in government. We will go back in government to repair the damage now. That's what we are going to do. What he means is that the cabinet may not have had a minute that deals with Nelson Gate. But as Prime Minister, I am asking him today, were you aware, forget cabinet for a minute, were you aware as head of cabinet of this Nelson Gate matter? Were you aware of the payments? Because Faris Alwari could not, as Attorney General, authorize the payment of $10 million plus to anybody. He could not pay anything to anybody, I believe, over a few $100,000 from his ministry. So Mr. Colin Imbert must state, did you as Minister of Finance, Mr. Imbert, authorize the payments to Vincent Nelson of $10+ million pursuant to that indemnity agreement? Did Keith Rowley know about this? He must have known. No cabinet minister will authorize millions of dollars to pay a witness without the authority of the Prime Minister. So, Prime Minister, were you aware? Forget the cabinet for a minute. We're not interested in Gatsby Dolly and Lashley and whoever. That's his name? The Minister of Labour and so on. We're not interested in whether they knew of it. We're interested in whether you, as head of government, head of the cabinet, had knowledge of this Nelson Gate matter insofar as giving permission, authority to spend money on this and to make agreements for presidential pardon, for money for his lawyers in England, for money for his lawyers in Trinidad, for a hotel and food in the Hyatt. These people were wolfing down lobster, guzzling whiskey and champagne, and the taxpayer paying for that. And Rowley must have known. You cannot tell a population like this today that you didn't have a clue. Rowley is saying, I had no clue. I knew about goat and sheep in Tobago. I know nothing of Nelson in Trinidad. That is what he's trying to tell us. He must have known and tell us, were you aware of this? Forget the other members of the cabinet for this minute. Were you aware? Because Alwari say you were aware. Yourself, what is the next person again? Scotland, Stuart Young, and somebody else. They were aware of it. So, Keith Rowley, don't try to hide behind cabinet and a cabinet meeting now. Were you aware? Did you and Imbert authorize the payment of that money? If not, Faris Alwari is in more trouble because he could not have authorized $10 million plus to pay anyone or any organization. So I leave that there.
Dr. Moonilal, you also mentioned the outstanding payments to TTT from PNM regarding broadcast of rallies and such. Are there any estimates on what is the full cost of these outstanding payments?
In the fiscal alone, because remember the question we asked is only about the fiscal year. We could not have asked for before. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This would easily run you into about $500,000 plus for those broadcasts. It would be plus $500,000. So that this is taxpayers' money. I keep saying that this is taxpayers' money. Instead of giving hampers to people, instead of organizing so people can get more benefits, social welfare benefits and so on, you take taxpayers' money and pay for PNM broadcasts. And they do that in the context where, in this country today, I mean, everybody know, in the health center, a policeman got a burn on his hand, he went to San Fernando. They could not get gauze. Gauze. They had no gauze in the hospital. They had no gauze, they had no cotton wool. He had to carry that to the hospital to treat himself. When you go for a tablet somewhere in that hospital, you can't get that. Today, people are still spending days. We have gone back to the pre-2010 days, where people are spending 2 days on a pira in the hospital and they cannot get a bed, notwithstanding we build a next hospital in San Fernando, because the management cannot work. And that is a crisis we face. And when you're doing that, $500,000 plus go free to the PNM as a political party to talk rubbish in the night at these meetings that they have somewhere around the place.
Dr. Moonilal, regarding Nelson Gate, you mentioned Minister Young. Minister Young has never come out and denied meeting Mr. Nelson on an airplane. He is still insisting the matter is sub judice and therefore he can't discuss it. However, in a statement, he did say that, quote, it can never be a breach of any proper legal agreement or law to provide evidence to a legitimate law enforcement agency.
If it could never be a breach to provide information to law enforcement authorities, why did you make that agreement? Why did you make the agreement in the first place? If you knew that that agreement was illegal, why did you make it? And why did you lead Vincent Nelson to feel that he was secure, that he can fabricate allegations and information and taint people's life and so on? He can do that because he depended on you not telling the British about that notarized statement. Why did you make it? That's a question to be asked. Not whether you had a duty under law to send it. Why did you make it in the first place? And what were you doing on an aeroplane 32,000 feet in the air, interfering and meddling with a witness, a key witness, star witness for that matter, in a criminal matter, an explosive criminal matter involving political opponents of the government? And I come back to where I started. We have reached this stage now where they are talking about in Brazil. They talk about it in other parts of the world too, where we have a politicized prosecutorial system. where prosecutions are being tainted by politics. And this undermines the judiciary, the criminal justice system, and the office holders in this system are being undermined. This is why, I mean, I don't want to bring CARICOM leaders into it, but there are CARICOM leaders now who are in office, who before they were in office, they were on charges of corruption. Because the justice system was undermined by their political opponents and working in tandem with the police. Mr. Gary Griffith has said they gave him $45 million and say, hello, that is not to buy uniform and fix car for patrol, you know. That is to go after the political opponents of the PNM. That was what they asked him to do, to hire people from England, make them, SRP. They have a woman, SRP Kate. This SRP Kate will go down very infamous as well in the political history of Trinidad and Tobago, to ask what did they do? How could they be SRPs and involved in criminal investigations, which is contrary to the law that matters before the court? And Mrs. Kate, wherever in the world you are, if you are listening, I know Mr. Haynes is listening. He listens every morning. Every Sunday morning, Mr. Haynes will listen to this press conference. He quoted the press conference in Parliament Friday. Mr. Haynes, you must quickly check the law to find out the SRP. When you make people SRP, the law specifies what they can do, and they cannot be involved in criminal investigations because it's contrary to the Police Act and the Constitution. I leave that as it is. Lawyers will talk more on that matter. But I know we are coming to the end. Mr. Haynes and all these ministers have all the security in the world when the population has no security. When we go to bed in the night, if we hear a noise, if a glass falls somewhere, we get up quick, we frightened. There's paranoia in the country now. While there are ministers, Mrs. Kamla Prasad Bisesa made this point last week and before, there are ministers whose job involves no law enforcement at all. They are provided with state security by this government. Today, I call upon the Prime Minister to remove all state security from government ministers and let them feel the same insecurity, let them feel the same paranoia, let them feel the same tension as ordinary citizens of Trinidad and Tobago are feeling today. Thank you.
Those are all the questions we have. So you want to wrap up?
Okay. All right. Thank you so much for joining us today at our opposition press briefing. We will continue these very important discussions at Monday's virtual report. So you can join us on all UNC channels at 7 p.m. tomorrow, Monday. Thank you very much again for tuning in.